Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today is it's really focused. We aren't looking at broad historical events or anything like that. Instead, we are plunging deep into three very specific, intensely documented moments of crisis.
Yeah, you can think of it as a kind of emotional scene analysis.
Exactly. We're acting as observers here.
That's right. The material we have, it's just this collection of really painstaking observations and these highly charged interactions. And it forces you as the observer to look so closely at what happens when human anxiety and, this very private vulnerability
And external pressure.
and all this external pressure all just collides and boils over. We're basically dissecting motivations, trying to chart the immediate emotional fallout and really understand what's driving these people to such extremes.
And the opening image we're starting with is just unbelievable. I mean, the tension is immediate, it's visceral, and it's not some big conflict in the outside world. It starts with the sound of a father.
In this grotesque costume.
Yes, in costume, desperately trying to eliminate this tiny, maddening squeak coming from his own bed. This isn't about getting a good night's sleep. This is a frantic battle for control, and you can tell right away it's already failing.
So our mission today is to break down three really distinct arenas of crisis. First, we have this bizarre collapsing family dynamic that's all centered on that faulty bed.
Right.
Second, we're going to get into a really fraught, high-stakes confrontation over intimacy and surrender, and it happens in an addiction recovery meeting.
And then
And finally, we'll explore this paralyzing, quiet terror of an administrative reckoning at a super competitive sports academy. We're going deep into what you could call compulsive observation and what happens when that desire to manage everything just completely snaps.
Okay, let's unpack this opening scene then, this domestic scene. It's set in the master bedroom, which is, stripped bare. It's gleaming, it's blazing with this bright sunlight. But the entire emotional reality of it is immediately just skewed by the father's appearance.
He looks like a creature from another dimension, really.
He does.
He's just come back from some kind of commercial gig, and he is still dressed completely in his uniform. He has this rigid white wig, the tight white trousers, the boots. He is, for all intents and purposes, the man from GLAAD.
A symbol of, perfect American domestic solutions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that whole costume, that whole facade,
Yeah.
is just fighting this losing battle with his real face.
The makeup, that heavy, almost toxic-looking orange television makeup, it gives his face this jarring, unnatural, and almost sickly orange cast, especially under the bright, natural daylight that's just flooding the room.
And that contrast between the rigid, pristine white uniform and the melting, garish orange of his actual face, that's really the first visual clue that this whole facade is completely unsustainable.
It's the sign of his discomfort, right? The sweat starts running almost instantly. You get these dark orange lines from under his wig, and they're staining the white sleeve of his uniform as he's trying to blot his forehead.
He is physically melting. It's like the internal heat of the moment is just dissolving him, and he can't maintain the composure that his costume is supposed to represent. That professional identity is literally dissolving under the pressure of this domestic crisis.
And before any of the real work starts, Jim, the son, he's given this responsibility. He has to hold his father's tomato juice tumbler.
Such a strange, specific detail.
It is, and it has these little grains of pepperish material floating on the surface, it feels like. Like it's an offering or some kind of element in a bizarre, compulsive ritual they're about to undertake.
It absolutely is. It just underscores this odd, almost nauseating meticulousness of the father's world. I mean, who puts pepper in tomato juice? Why did Jim have to hold it? This tiny detail just ratchets up the tension before they even get to the main problem.
And the work itself, this diagnostic ritual, as you called it, it begins with the king-size bed stripped down to just the mattress protector.
So the father, still in his gleaming white suit, gets on top of this bare mattress and just starts kneading it. He's kneeling, he's pressing down vigorously, pivoting on his knees. At some points, he's actually walking around on the mattress, just putting all of his weight into finding this sound.
And Jim's observation here is so insightful. He looks at his father doing this relentless, high-intensity action, and he immediately connects it to something life or death. He says it looks very much like emergency compression of a heart patient's chest.
Right. So a mundane annoyance, a little noise, is being treated with the desperate force and urgency that you would use to save a life, and that tells you everything. This noise represents some kind of existential threat to the father's composure, to his whole world.
So the moment of discovery, when he finds the spot, it's immediately followed by this torrent of rage. He isolates it, shouts "Eureka!" and then just unleashes Goddamn bed squeaks.
And he has to test it repeatedly. He keeps pressing it, forcing the noise out, as if he needs to confirm his own misery. And crucially, he needs witnesses.
That need for a forced agreement is so important, isn't it? He demands validation from the mother. She's just been quietly observing the lawn from the window, smoking.
Yeah, she's trying to stay out of it.
And he drags her in. He says, "Do you or do you not hear that?" He forces her to break her silent composure, to lean over the spot and apply pressure herself, just to confirm the squeak.
And the mother's quiet presence is its own kind of controlled suffering. We're told she carries this small bottle of moisturizing lotion everywhere because her hands flake in the dry climate. It's this small, persistent need for relief that hints at her own quiet, sustained forms of anxiety.
It's a real contrast to her husband's explosive, immediate eruption.
Absolutely. She maintains this meticulous control while he spirals. Once that squeak is validated by her, the escalation of his anxiety is rapid and it's incredibly aggressive. The language he uses is just stunningly violent.
He calls the bed miserable cocksucking. He claims the squeak spreads and metastasizes.
Using cancer terminology for a noise.
Yeah. And then he articulates his internal fear as being consumed by boiling hordes of gibbering, squeaking, ravenous, rapacious rats.
That's not just hyperbole. I mean, that is pure psychological projection. The rats, they represent this unseen, uncontrollable decay and maybe debt, the things that are gnawing away at the foundations of their life. The squeak is just the auditory confirmation that the rats are already inside the house and they're eating him alive.
And, of course, he immediately externalizes the blame. He shifts it onto the one person who isn't melting in theatrical makeup. He looks at Jim, but he's talking about his wife.
He says, this miserable cocksucking bed your mother felt she needed to hang on to.
Right. And we learn that this is about so much more than the bed. The mother previously had to assume the burden of assuming responsibility for finances in the household.
So this simple furniture problem, squeak, it becomes a battleground. It's for all their prior financial disagreements, the failing structure of their relationship. The bed isn't just squeaking, the marriage is.
So the father comes up with a plan. The squeak, he decides, must be caused by old metal frame bolts coming loose. He needs Jim to help him move the whole massive mattress and box spring entirely out of the way so he can get to the frame.
But Jim, he offers this moment of detached analytical resistance. He suggests that maybe the mattress itself is the culprit. He even calls the bolt theory an exotic first-order explanation.
He's basically proposing Occam's razor. The simplest answer is often the right one.
Exactly. But the father rejects this completely while pretending to embrace it. He has to maintain control over the diagnosis. He says, synchronicity surrounds me. Great minds think alike. Before just dismissing the mattress theory entirely.
And he brings it back to money. He emphasizes the financial stakes. A new mattress would be fucking outrageous, but a new frame wouldn't be too bad. So the solution has to fit the financial and emotional narrative that he needs it to.
And the physical execution of this plan is it's chaos. They're struggling with this king-size Simmons Beauty Rest mattress, which is huge, but it has no structural integrity. It's described as flaccid and floppy.
And the father's old tennis injury makes the strain even worse.
Which leads to Jim's ultimate coping mechanism. This is the moment of physical impact where he just completely abstracts the emotional experience into pure geometry. As this huge, unwieldy mattress is toppling toward him, he supports the weight with his chest, his arms, his face, seeing nothing but the floral pattern of the mattress protector.
And instead of reacting to the danger or the pain, his immediate internal process is to visualize the mattress, the box spring, and his own body forming a right dihedral triangle.
It's a perfect psychological defense. I mean, when the physical and emotional chaos becomes overwhelming, Jim just retreats entirely into this reliable, predictable world of math and physics. He uses geometry as an immediate shield against the impact.
The chaos just keeps going. The lamps get hit, creating a painful squeaking sound, which is ironic, because the bed isn't the only source of irritating noise in this house.
Right. And they noticed the reading lamps were on this whole time, unnecessarily, in this bright, sunlit room. It just adds to this sense of visual and sensory overload that's mirroring what's going on inside the father.
So they finally manage to stack the mattress and the box springs out in the hall. The room goes silent except for the sounds of lawnmowers outside and, buzzing dust motes in the air.
In the father's mood, for a second it's elevated. He claps Jim on the back. But the triumph is so short-lived because now the core truth of the problem is about to be revealed.
The exposed frame. It looks exoskeletal and frail, and beneath it lies just decay.
Hmm.
This thick, clotted layer of gray-white dust. It's not just settled dust. It looks like spoiled food, bad cottage cheese.
And it gives off this nauseating, sour and fungal odor, like an old, dirty bath mat. This exposed filth is the perfect physical manifestation of the hidden decay in their life, in their marriage. It's what they've been meticulously ignoring for years.
And along with the dust, you have the lost items, a fly swatter, wadded up Kleenex, a sock, just the minor debris of a neglected life.
And the father's mood just instantly collapses back into this violent rage. He demands to know when was the last time this got cleaned under here, and the mother is just silent, stoically absorbing all of it.
Jim, he's still trying to normalize the situation. He mentions his own squeaky bed, says he finds the sound almost comforting. He's trying to establish some kind of shared, less frantic reality where noises are just part of life.
But the father is having none of it. He aggressively cuts him off, crushing that attempted connection. And he confirms Jim's squeak is just another point of aggravation for them. Oh, we hear your bed, don't you worry.
And then he just violently shakes the frail frame. He's trying to fix this mechanical problem through sheer, frustrated force.
This physical exertion, it just makes his internal collapse even worse. He tries to squat down to examine the frame, but his body is struggling. His white tunic rides up, you see his corset or girdle, and these deep red folds appear in the back of his neck. He is literally fighting his own failing body as much as he's fighting the bed.
And all the while, Jim is just maintaining his analytical detachment. He squats down easily, assesses the caster bolts, and determines that their round, smooth heads make them impossible to tighten or loosen.
Meaning they are not the cause of the squeak.
Exactly. His initial rational diagnosis, the exotic first-order explanation, is vindicated, just as his father is physically collapsing right next to him.
And then the climax.
Yeah.
The father leans out over the side of the frame. He gets sick. There's this loud, wet coughing sound. Something hits the floor. And then you hear this loud, cracking sound as he just pitches forward and faints.
He's lying prone, face down, in this mixture of dust and stomach material, which Jim analytically notes looks like blood until he remembers the tomato juice.
The fall breaks, or at least badly bends, the very frame he was obsessing over. His wig detaches and lies scalp up on the floor.
And the final, complete shattering of his whole facade is this humiliating physical exposure. The force of the fall pulls his white slacks down, exposing his bottoms crack all the way down to the anus itself.
Yeah.
The man from Glad is just utterly, physically, and publicly negated.
Jim's reaction to this total collapse is incredible. He stands over his unconscious father, he analyzes his breathing, and then he immediately retreats back into abstraction.
He reanalyzes the geometry of the fallen mattress. He realizes his previous dihedral triangle calculation was wrong because the floor and the box spring weren't continuous. His mind is rejecting the emotional trauma by just refining the mathematical model.
He steps carefully over his father's legs, even says a detached, to help his mother go get the Regina vacuum cleaner.
The vacuum. The symbol of this forced cleanup, a return to some kind of manufactured order, it arrives on the scene.
And Jim makes his escape. He runs upstairs and executes a full swan dive onto his own high, old-fashioned bed. He is specifically aiming for a loud squeak.
He's desperately seeking that comforting sound he mentioned earlier. It's like he wants a controlled, self-inflicted release of the very same tension that just destroyed his father.
And he finds the squeak, but in the process he causes new chaos. His arm hits this heavy, high-intensity standing lamp, which falls and shears off his closet door's brass knob.
And the very last image of this scene is just pure intellectual abstraction as a defense mechanism. As the vacuum cleaner is shrieking below, signaling the slow, inevitable cleanup of the domestic horror show.
The knob is rolling on the wooden floor, and Jim is completely distracted from the noise and the family disaster by calculating the non-Euclidean physics of the knob's path.
A cycloid on a sphere.
Right. And for anyone who hasn't encountered that term, a cycloid is the curve that's traced by a point on a circle as it rolls along a straight line. But here, the sphere, the knob is rolling on a plane, the floor. It's moving along dual axes.
And he schematizes this motion as someone trying to do somersaults with one hand nailed to the floor. He is literally nailing down his terrifying, messy reality into a complex analytical problem. He's finding refuge in the certainty that geometry holds, even if his family does not.
That is just profound. So we move from this single private domestic breakdown that's managed through geometry to a complex communal breakdown that's managed through enforced physical and really aggressive contact.
Our second scene is at an NA beginners discussion meeting, and it's focused specifically on marijuana addiction. The setting is the anechoic vestry of an upscale church.
A space designed for sonic isolation, which is ironic because the whole point is to show the attendees that they are completely non-unique and unalone.
And the sources immediately establish that the consensus here on marijuana addiction is that it's devastating. It leads to the slow, thorough destruction and severe psychic fallout. It's not just about physical dependence, it's a social and emotional eradication.
We get this whole list of psychic consequences. Social isolation, chronic fatigue, anxious lassitude, hyper self-consciousness, emotional abstraction, and total emotional catalepsy.
Emotional catalepsy. Can you break that down for us?
It's basically a trance-like state where the person is completely unresponsive. They'll maintain any rigid posture that they're placed in. They are, for all intents and purposes, emotionally frozen solid.
And the physical symptoms of the detox are equally humiliating. Loss of appetite, insomnia, generalized anxiety, the sense of foreboding and dread. But the most specific detail is the excess saliva.
The institutional drool cups.
Yeah, the beginners are still holding these institutional drool cups under their chins.
That detail is so critical. It just underscores the sheer physical humiliation and the loss of basic bodily control that's required to even participate in this process. And yet, the deep, unnameable suffering, the melancholy, the clinical depression, that's never spoken of directly.
It just hangs fog-like over the room. It's a terror too great to name.
Right. And you can see the emotional distress manifesting so vividly. There's a member of the group, Kate Gombert, and she's repeatedly miming shooting herself in the temple and blowing pretend cordite off the barrel.
It's a shocking display of extreme, raw vulnerability. She can't suppress or hide these self-harming urges.
And observing all of this is Kenner Codetti. He's the quintessential detached analyst, a lot like Jim in the first scene, but his focus is external. He says nothing. He just watches everyone closely.
And his own internal nervous energy is only visible through his constant cracking of his knuckles and the joggling of his foot.
He views the group with this analytical, almost judging eye. He notes the motley disrespectability, observes the people who are still wearing their psych ward ID bracelets because they just lack the drive to remove them. He's maintaining his distance, assessing the suffering of others while keeping his own completely locked down.
So the meeting closes with the standard chant, but then the whole atmosphere shifts completely. It becomes, as it's described, kind of horrifically destabilizing.
Everyone starts milling around wildly and hugging each other. It's rampant, indiscriminate hugging, and the whole point is maximum required physical contact.
And this is the moment Erdedi's carefully constructed analytical detachment is just violently challenged. He dislikes hugging. He immediately resists. He retreats to the conference-approved literature table and pretends to be studying the coffee urn.
He's trying to intellectualize his way out of forced intimacy.
But he gets spotted by Roy Toney, a tall, heavy African-American man who approaches him, arms spread wide for the embrace.
And Erdedi tries to refuse politely, intellectually. He raises his hands in this benign no thanks, backing up until his bottom hits the table, and he explains, I don't particularly like to hug, just not a hugger.
And this polite refusal just causes an instant catastrophe. Roy Toney is left frozen, his arms still out, the smile just draining from his face.
Erdedi's immediate internal response is so telling. He finds himself calculating the maximum possible distance from that spot to a remote sub-Asian locale. His mind immediately starts preparing this intellectual escape from the physical confrontation.
But Roy Toney takes this profound, violent offense. He interprets Erdedi's non-hugging as a moral judgment on him. He says, you saying you think I go around like to hug?
And this is where the core conflict of this recovery process is really revealed. Roy Toney isn't personally offended by the rejection of intimacy. He's offended by the rejection of the shared, coerced surrender.
He lays out the brutal reality of the process. We fucking do what they tell us. They tell us hugs, not drugs in here. We done motherfucking surrendered our wills in here.
And he admits that the initial hugs were so uncomfortable for him that he ran in the fucking can and fucking puked.
So it raises this powerful question. If the vulnerability is forced and it's physically painful, is refusing it disrespectful, or is submitting to it just another act of violence against yourself?
Exactly. And Roy Toney reveals his motivation. He felt Erdedi disrespected him right after he just risked sharing his vulnerability and discomfort by submitting to the hug ritual himself.
He delivers the choice so starkly. The demand isn't for comfort, it's for an acknowledgement of the required sacrifice. He says, "You gonna risk vulnerability and discomfort and hug my ass? Or do I gonna fucking rip your head off and shit down your neck?"
It's forced submission, a complete negation of choice. And Erdedi, who is now being physically held off the ground by his jacket lapels, he succumbs completely.
Janet Foltz tries to intervene, but it's too late. The confrontation has already achieved its violent purpose.
And Erdedi responds by hugging Roy Tony with this desperate vigor. It's an almost grotesque performance of submission. Kate Gompert observes later that he looked like he was trying to climb him.
So he couldn't just refuse the vulnerability, he could only perform it with an intensity that still felt disconnected and forced. The refusal of that shared surrender was instantly and violently negated.
His analytical detachment failed the second he realized he couldn't just observe the suffering or the ritual. He had to participate, fully and physically. And the required submission to emotional honesty, which he tried to avoid with analytical distance, came back at him as a physically threatening demand for submission.
So we move now from forced intimacy in a recovery setting to the paralyzing anxiety of a sports academy waiting room, where the collapse of control is entirely existential and administrative.
We're now at the Enfield Tennis Academy, or ETA specifically. We're in the headmaster, Dr. Charles Taddis's waiting room. And the atmosphere is designed to be soothing, but it only heightens the distress.
How so?
The room is just aggressively saturated in different shades of blue. The shag carpet, the wallpaper, which is sky and clouds, everything is blue.
The sensory details are overwhelming. Hal Incandenza is physically and mentally distressed. He's still recovering from a dental removal, so the whole left side of his face feels big and dead, and he has this terrifying, persistent sensation that he's drooling.
And he's squeezing his tennis ball like a maniac just to cope with the anxiety.
And the noise is contributing to it. Michael Pemulus is bobbing in his chair, making this rapid rodential squeaking sound that gives Hal the howling phantods a state of paralyzing dread.
The whole group waiting Hal, Pemulus, Trevor Axford, and Kitten Plan, they're anticipating disciplinary action from a recent Eschaton disaster.
And for context, Eschaton is this incredibly complex, high-stakes tennis game that models global nuclear strategy. It involves complex math, and there are potential real-world consequences if the calculations are misinterpreted.
And they are terrified that they're facing serious pukers, which is a type of disciplinary training at the academy designed explicitly to inflict pain and enforce an attitude adjustment, all disguised as conditioning drills. The stakes are physical punishment and maybe expulsion.
But before we even get to the reckoning for that, we have to understand the highest stakes of self-control failure at this academy, and that is the horrifying film known as The Entertainment.
This film is the ultimate threat to personal autonomy. We're told about his danger through two victims. One is an idiot intern who viewed the film, and the other, crucially, is Hank Hoyne, the head of data analysis.
A 20-year man, described as an American adult of exemplary self-control.
And Hoyne is now in 4-point restraints. He's being tube-fed, and he's begging for just a trailer or a snatch of soundtrack. His eyes are wobbling around like some drug-addicted newborn. He's a complete casualty of sensory overload.
So the nature of this addiction, it has to be deeply understood. Viewing The Entertainment collapses the viewer's world into one small breakpoint, and it leaves them empty of intent.
This passive reward is called terminal P. They don't want to do anything, think anything, or feel anything except to re-experience the film. It's the utter loss of will. And that's why the Canadian separatists respect and fear it. It's a weapon that eliminates the enemy's desire to fight.
So back in the waiting room, Hal's mother, Avril Incandenza, who is the dean of females, is holding this alternative diddle-check meeting in her doorless office just off to the side.
She has vividly white hair, she's imposingly tall, but her voice is oddly insubstantial, very high and airy.
And her lack of a door is a deliberate statement. It reflects her known aversion to enclosure, which contrasts really sharply with Tavis's double-doored office. This highlights the unusual dynamic between them. They're described as the dynamic duo of compulsion, both sleeping minimally in separate rooms in the headmaster's house.
Right, and Avril is subtly probing these young girls about being touched by a tall person in an uncomfortable way. The girls' anxious diversions are almost funny, getting pinched by grandma, patted like a schnauzer. But Avril just gently steers the topic back. She uses her high voice and her imposing presence to enforce this subtle psychological pressure.
Let's focus now on the man they are all waiting for, Dr. Charles Tavis, the headmaster. His professional history is in accommodating spectator crowds. He's known for the Sky Dome fiasco, where hotel rooms with guests having exotic sex were visible.
And were once projected onto the scoreboard.
Right. His background is managing and sometimes failing to contain public spectacle and massive, chaotic visibility.
And he has two very distinct personas. The first is his social composition. He's physically small, he often appears to be receding, he suffers from locational panic, and he displays pathological openness.
That's a crucial concept. What does that mean?
Pathological openness means he thinks out loud about thinking out loud. He just removes the normal cognitive filters that protect a person's inner state. So this persona appears vulnerable and highly anxious, but it's also completely exhausting and overwhelming for anyone around him.
But the real danger is the second Tavis, the cornered rat.
Yes. When he's challenged, he stops all that frenetic open energy and he grows perspectively. He becomes very quiet and very still, and he rushes in at you with this frightening intensity. This is the cornered bureaucrat who is not to be fucked with, and that's the Tavis the students are waiting for.
While they wait, the administrative background noise just continues. There's Lateral Alice Moore, the receptionist nicknamed Lateral, because of a helicopter crash trauma that left her only able to move side to side.
Which is just another one of these bizarre, stressful details.
It is. She's typing responses to invitations, wearing powder blue headphones, creating the needly sound of her dot matrix printer, and her desk has a danger third rail plaque. It just reinforces the sense that this seemingly benign space holds lethal risk.
In Pemulus, trying to banish his own anxiety, he fixates on his most immediate escape route. He's bantering with Alice, subtly trying to figure out if he's been invited to the Whataburger Invitational by checking for the initials MMP. His compulsion is to focus on the next most controllable thing.
And Hal's coping mechanism, like Jim's, is intellectual performance. He recalls this exchange with his mother, Avril, about an apple politeness roulette, she calls it, and the word clinkers, just to show off his capacity for complex knowledge. He acknowledges he hates it that she could even dream he'd be taken in by her psychological games.
Intellectual abstraction is his defense against emotional obligation and familial manipulation.
And then the final alarm signs sound. Alice is formally buzzed to bring them in. She edges them through like you're some sort of hat-holding salesman without once meeting your eye. The transition from waiting to reckoning is a social humiliation.
Inside, Tavis is embodying the cornered rat. He is quiet and still, pulsing with swollen proximity, coolly bending a giant paperclip into a sloppy circle. It's this focused, frightening display of controlled, impending control.
And the room is filled with authority figures and, critically, with victims. There's Dr. Dolores Rusk, the diddle-check psychologist, whom Pemulus hates so much he once electrified her doorknob. She's there, her hose is laddered, her face is blank.
And then there is the devastating image of Escott and Casualty, poor old Otis P. Lord. He's sitting next to Rusk, slumped, with a Tachi monitor casing over his head, like the salad of some grotesque high-tech night.
Shards of glass are wickedly hanging near his throat, and it requires the day shift nurse to hold the monitor in place. Lord, a victim of the game's complexity, is physically restrained by the monitor, a symbol of the terrifying, addictive control structure of the Academy. He requires constant external support to prevent self-harm.
He is the physical manifestation of what happens when control collapses into terminal P.
And the final twist seals their fate. Tavis addresses the last occupant of the room who's been hidden in the shadow behind them this whole time, a scrubbed young button-nosed urologist.
The urine expert.
The urine expert. Tavis quietly asks him, please to close both doors. This action is the last sound of the administrative review. The students are locked in. The whole thing shifts from a public administrative review to quiet, intensely private scrutiny.
And the presence of a urologist suggests that the examination of their internal integrity and control is about to become highly intimate and possibly very, very humiliating.
So if we synthesize these three high-stakes scenarios, the father, Erdity, and Hal, the short thread here is just the devastating cost of trying to maintain these internal boundaries against overwhelming anxiety and external demands.
In every single case, observation and compulsion are what drive the action. The father's compulsion over a squeak masked this intense emotional and financial strain, and it led to a violent physical collapse and a messy public humiliation, a total loss of his professional facade.
And Erdity's desperate need to resist forced vulnerability, to maintain that analytical distance and recovery, it led to a forced, violent performance of submission, the most intense hug possible, a bodily surrender to a psychological mandate.
And then you have Hal and the students facing the quiet terror of Tavis's shifting, quiet authority. And it's all magnified by the knowledge of Hoyne and Lord, who have suffered the total collapse of the self. They're victims of an entertainment so addictive it destroys will itself, leaving them completely empty of intent.
What stands out so much is how each character retreats into technical observation or abstraction when their control collapses. Jim uses geometry to abstract his father's fall and the domestic chaos.
Arditi uses analytical distance to judge others until he's forced into proximity. Hal uses intellectual performance and this constant self-monitoring, checking his drooling, squeezing his ball, just to keep the anxious self at bay.
And when their internal control mechanisms fail, the resulting spectacle, a detached collapse into vomit in geometry, a forced hug at knife point, or a broken victim wearing a monitor helmet, it's intensely memorable and grotesque.
Yeah, the very act of observing these highly specific details is what sustains these characters, but it also isolates them from the messiness of actual human connection and real vulnerability.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you observe these intensely real events? In a world where personal boundaries are constantly violated, whether by orange television makeup or compulsory hugging, or a headmaster's pathological openness that sees everything, what is the most dangerous information to observe about yourself or about others?
And how far will people go to regain that feeling of psychological control, even if it requires a mathematical abstraction that denies the messy reality of being human, or a violent public submission that destroys self-respect? The core question remains, when the rats are already inside the house, where do you find a solution that isn't just another form of compulsive observation?